you can see Bitcoin again remains in that channel that I've given you guys. Again, all we're doing here is simply connecting the dots, pivot low, pivot low, pivot low, and pivot low, pivot high, and pivot high, and pivot high. Now, we are seeing a nice little bid today. The idea is that if we're going to see approval, it's going to be in the next 3 days. We're basically coming down to a deadline. So I do think approval does come. I've said that since the very beginning. I wouldn't be seeing various commercials on CNBC. I wouldn't be seeing so much hubbub. You wouldn't have the BlackRock CEO going and making all these tours around talking up Bitcoin if it wasn't expected to be approval.
Welcome, Crypto Street investors. Get ready for a ride through the world of cryptocurrencies. Today, Bitcoin reached $46,490. Pivot low, pivot high, it's like a dance. The exciting part? A deadline is approaching, and if the whispers are true, approval might be just around the corner. Don't blink, you might miss the action. But before we dive into the charts, show some love. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for an amazing discussion with our expert, Gareth Soloway.
Let's get right into the charts as we go here. So you can see Bitcoin again remains in that channel that I've given you guys. Again, all we're doing here is simply connecting the dots, pivot low, pivot low, pivot low, and pivot low, pivot high, and pivot high, and pivot high. Now, we are seeing a nice little bid today. The idea is that if we're going to see approval, it's going to be in the next 3 days. We're basically coming down to a deadline. So I do think approval does come. I've said that since the very beginning. I wouldn't be seeing various commercials on CNBC. I wouldn't be seeing so much hubbub. You wouldn't have the BlackRock CEO going and making all these tours around talking up Bitcoin if it wasn't expected to be approval. Now, the bigger question remains is, where do we go? I continue to think that we could have an initial reaction, which would be up. And then the question is, do we then start to sell off? And I'm generally in that bias that I think this, again, you've seen an incredible run in Bitcoin. It's probably due for some sort of corrective move, maybe down to 38,000. That's for support. And then obviously down, maybe if it continues down to 30,000. Sometimes you have to ignore the public. And this is what I've done for 24 years is follow the charts, ignore the hubbub. And by the way, it doesn't mean that these won't go back up at some point, but there's opportunities intra-move, and that's really important. Gold continues to be pushed back off of this resistance line, but it's staying close enough that, in my opinion, it's still coming. You still have that inverse head and shoulders. I've gone over this a million times with you guys. Once this breaks out, you're going to get a measured move, likely from here all the way up. So again, look for that measured move on gold.
Now let's dive deep into the wisdom shared by Gareth Soloway. Bitcoin continues within the familiar channel we've been keeping an eye on. Connecting the dots from pivot lows to pivot highs, it's like following a roadmap to potential fortune. With the deadline looming, the big question is approval. And Gareth's been echoing it from the start. But here's the twist. What happens after approval? Gareth's crystal ball sees a potential initial upward surge, followed by a corrective move. Brace yourselves, Bitcoin might take a detour down to $38,000, finding support and possibly hitting the $30,000 mark. It's like predicting the twists in a blockbuster movie, unexpected, thrilling, and full of surprises. And don't forget, the drama doesn't end with Bitcoin. Gold's still in the spotlight, resisting pressure at a critical resistance line. Gareth's eyeing an inverse head and shoulders pattern that could send gold on a measured move journey. Get ready for financial fireworks. Let's get back to Gareth.
Right now, the S&P 500 futures, where the markets are trading fractionally higher. We've been kind of flip-flopping all over the place. We obviously see the S&P has come in off of the recent highs into year-end. My guess is, again, a lot of tax profit taking was going on here in the new year. Now, for the most part, the key remains that as long as we maintain this pivot point right here, all right, so this was your former pivot, right? That was the highest point. A pivot basically is the highest point in recent history. As long as that is maintained and we don't see price start trading below that, then that level basically becomes your key level of interest. So price can trade down into it, which means we could still go a little bit lower in this early period in the year. As long as, again, you don't break below that, the market would maintain a neutral to positive bias. All right, now again, a couple things to look at here as we go into a few other factors. I want to show you quickly the 10-year chart. Now, the 10-year continues to bounce off key support. It is basically flat today, not much price movement here, which explains why the stock market is so quiet. By the way, we're going to still talk about Bitcoin ETF, likely approval on the spot side on Wednesday or before. We are seeing Bitcoin pop up a little bit this morning on anticipation. Okay, one more chart I want to show you here that I think is awesome. Remember the US dollar chart. Remember last week we talked about this trend line right here to here, and it gave us this pivot low. I want to show you something that I just found on the charts that, again, these type of things just continue to absolutely amaze me. So what we do is if we take this line here and we stretch it down, right? So let's stretch this down, right? We take that pivot high down to these recent pivot points, and we drop that parallel down. Look at what we get. We actually get a key trend line that is the trend line we already have on the charts. So my point is this, is that the markets, again, as chaotic as charts may seem, there's some sort of symmetry to the charts. In other words, this line here, right from here to here to here, which gave us this low, is actually perfectly parallel with this high up here and this high right down here. Now, what's interesting about this is I want to show you this. Remember last week we talked about how the symmetry of the charts, you use Fibonacci to kind of confirm. And if we take the highest point here, right? And again, I'm going to do this now with you guys. If we take this highest point and we drop a fib down to the lowest point on the dollar and stretch that out, what do we get? We get our exact high as well. So the 618 Fibonacci level, or excuse me, the 50% retrace right here, that is right here as well. So notice all the confluence of levels that you get at that particular high. Now, last week I summarized, or I hypothesized that maybe the bounce on the dollar would do the same thing and go up to maybe the 50% retrace. Well, if we do that now, let's go back here, guys. So let's take away this fib right here. And if we do the Fibonacci right to this level here, all right, and we look at the retrace, excuse me, I apologize. I want to do it from the highest point here down to the lowest point. If we look at that and we do this down to here, what we can see is that we ultimately have a new Fibonacci level. And again, interestingly enough, the 50% fib level and the 618 are right in this range. I personally think the dollar still has a little bit of upside to go until we get into those ranges, which would also potentially, if you stretch this out, if we go out further in time, let's say another month before the dollar gets up there, you would actually be at the same Fibonacci retrace as what we had from this bigger fib level right up here. Just little things like that. Really cool to kind of think about on the charts, how there's so much a confluence of levels at particular points. And that's why support and resistance work so well. It's usually not such a key thing that, oh, it's just one trend line. There's usually, and this is even my issue, is that it's hard to find all the confluences of factors, but the more you look, the more you explore technical analysis and the different tactics, the more interesting things you come up with. All right, couple other charts here, guys. Here's the QQQ. The Qs are trading up about 40 cents on the day. So again, minor little uptick on the NASDAQ 100. Apple pre-market, again, hammered into that key level. If we flip over to the Apple chart, remember this level from last week? We talked about this on Friday. The daily 200 moving average right there at around the 180 level. We kissed it on Friday. This morning pre-market, we actually pierced 180. We're now trading near 182. I do think Apple is due for a technical bounce here. How high? That's the bigger question. Maybe back into this range. There's going to be a lot of resistance around 188. In a really bull move, if the stock market really catches a bid, we're going to be looking for the gap fill right up around 192. Now, one of the big stories of the morning is Boeing. Boeing, again, guys, getting pounded after basically one of the doors blew out on the aircraft. The stock is trading down almost $20. It's trading at $230.33 after closing at $249 on Friday. So that's a big move down, folks. And again, you know, there's a lot of issues now. Are there going to have to be more recalls, more groundings, all of these different things? But the key is, where does this start to look interesting? And the answer is pretty simple here. If we zoom out on this chart, right, and we look at this area, there's a huge area of support right in here. Look at all these highs before we popped up, broke down, and then broke out. So that, to me, in the short term today, right here, right basically around 220-ish, give or take a little bit, that is going to be a very important level today. For me, at least, I'll be looking at as a day trade if it dumps out down in that range. Again, we're about $10 away on this. On a stock that's dealing with this type of news, it wouldn't be outlandish to see it trade down into that level. But again, huge, like all these highs right along here, All of those highs are right in that level. You can see, again, the breakout right there.
Back for more financial thrills with Gareth Soloway. The S&P 500 futures are doing a little moves, trading fractionally higher. The market's been a roller coaster, but as long as we maintain a critical pivot point, the game remains neutral. Gareth unlocks the mystery of the charts, revealing the symphony of support and resistance levels. A peek into the QQQ, NASDAQ 100, Apple's dance around the 200-day moving average, and the Boeing bombshell. Boeing's turbulence unfolds as a door blows out, causing a nosedive in stock price. Where's the silver lining? Gareth spots a potential support zone amidst the chaos, and it's game on for day traders. The charts tell tales of highs, lows, and unexpected twists. As we explore the confluence of factors, support and resistance, remember, in the chaotic world of charts, there's always a method to the madness. The crypto street roller coaster is far from over. Subscribe, hit like, and join us as we navigate the twists and turns of the crypto universe together. The adventure continues, and we're your guides on this thrilling journey through the heart of Crypto Street.